Communism is the political and economic doctrine that aims to replace private property in a profit-based economy with public ownership and a communal control of at least the major means of production, and this includes setups such as mines and factories. This means that the things we consider necessary on a daily basis, such as food, housing, and education, are provided for by the government. By this definition, communism seems like a fair system that promotes equality and takes care of its citizens. However, this doesn't turn out to be true when actually applied to a nation, and instead results in totalitarian dictatorships, oppressive government, and a violation of basic human rights. For these reasons, the Catholic Church has outwardly condemned communism as a practice. On March 13, 1937, Pope Pius XI spoke on communism in his Domini Redemptoris. This document explained the atheistic and materialistic view that communism inevitably fosters. According to this doctrine, there is in the world only one reality, matter, the blind forces of which evolve into plant, animal, and man. Even human society is nothing but a phenomenon in form of matter. Since communism fosters this belief in only a materialistic world, it clearly denies the existence of a God. There is no place for the belief in a God in the classist society that communism aims for. As said in Pope Leo XIII's Quod Apostolici Muneris, they refuse obedience to the higher powers, to whom, according to the admonition of the Apostle, every soul ought to be subject, and who derive the right of governing from God. Catholics put God first and their neighbors second, whereas communism supports selfishness. There is authority in the system of the Church, with God at the highest point, trickling down from the Pope to parents and lay people. There are understood levels of authority, and when that authority is made obsolete, it comes in conflict with the fourth commandment, honor your father and your mother. Though the ultimate end goal of communism is to reach a classless society, it also holds the idea that class argumentation supports the growth of man. Insisting on the dialectical aspect of their materialism, the communists claim that the conflict which carries the world towards its final synthesis can be accelerated by man. Hence they endeavor to sharpen the antagonisms which arise between the various classes of society. There will always be class division, especially so in a society that promises provisions for basic needs. With basic needs met, people will strive for unnecessary materials to express their wealth. This creates more societal tension and emphasizes materialism. Human nature also makes the application of a non-hostile communist country impossible. The Catholic Church teaches that humans are fallible and constantly being led into temptation. So how can it be expected that, out of an entire society, no one will give in to the temptation for power and control, especially in times of hardship, when fear leads citizens to look toward a figurehead to take control and fix the problem? It would be easy for a person or group of people to take control of the system with the support of scared people grasping for a solution. This is why it is easy to see how communist societies have often become rigid dictatorships that suppress human rights. Communist societies often develop a regimen of religious persecution in an effort to further unite citizens. It's a simple conclusion that a society in which all of its citizens held the same ideologies and belief systems, there would be less dissent among its members. This is the goal many communist leaders strive for, a society with compliant citizens and no rebellion. Communism is atheistic and materialistic. It is a denial of human spiritual dignity, human rights, and human freedom. This inevitably creates tension from within the country. Again, it is human nature that makes communism inapplicable. In a group of people, even a small one, there is rarely complete agreement. No two people are the same. They each have different experiences, different upbringings, different interactions and perceptions of the world around them. This is a good thing. The sharing and diverging of ideas should be fostered in a society, not suppressed. In China, human rights, especially those of women, have been stifled largely through legislation enacting the one-child policy. In 1978, China's population growth became so uncontrollable that the government recommended families to have only 1 or 2 children, but later dropped it down to 1 child. This decree came with very few guidelines and led to it being inconsistently applied in different parts of the country. So in 1980, the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, changed the recommendation into law and instated inhumane policies and punishments to enforce it. Couples could be facing social compensation fees, which equaled 20% of the couple's annual income paid for 7 years for a second child, and 40% of the annual income paid for 14 years for a third child. Women in rural areas often had to undergo periodic forced checks to ensure that there was no recent birth. People's jobs and retirement funds were threatened if they were suspected of not having reported someone, and many women have had to undergo government-forced abortions because of having been reported by someone they may have trusted with the information. These invasive and cruel implications of the one-child policy are not only in great violation of the United Nations protection for human rights, but the Catholic view of human dignity. Children are considered a gift from God and should be protected at all costs. No human life should be labeled as burdensome or inconvenient. No one should be punished for protecting themselves or the ones they care about, and no government should have policies that threaten the well-being of its citizens. Allegations in UN conferences have been held also against North Korea, claiming a suppression of basic human rights such as freedom of speech, freedom of press, and freedom of religion. The tricky thing with North Korea, though, is that it is a hermit country, meaning that very few outsiders are allowed into the country and very little information leaves it. However, Spanish film director Alvaro Longoria and his documentary crew were permitted entrance with their cameras and allowed to interview the citizens, although with tight supervision and the constant accompaniment of tour guides. To the film crew, North Korea seemed to be a haven for its citizens, and the suspicions that the country's isolation was because of inner cruelties seemed false. Citizens and government employees stated that the reason the country was so isolated and closed off was to preserve the cultural integrity of the area. However, when the film crew interviewed Korean defectors, their stories were drastically different. One defector said, "Koreans are brainwashed from the moment they are born, and learn to worship the Kim leaders as deities, as well as to follow under their regimen at all times. That if anyone spoke out of turn or against the Kim family, they would be severely punished or even executed." Defectors say that there is no religious freedom, that newspapers and printed materials are closely examined and regulated to only spread North Korean positive sentiments, that people are starving even under the communist promise of an equal distribution of food and vital resources. The reason the accounts from in and out of the country are so different, as explained to the camera crew, is because of the great punishment and imprisonment citizens may endure if they were to speak ill of any part of the country, and in North Korea, imprisonment for one family member places a stigma and possible imprisonment on all other members as well, up to 3 generations. As James Chow explained, referring to defector Yeonmi Park's experience after her father was arrested for smuggling, when someone is sent to prison, that marks the next 3 generations, so not only her father and her mother, herself, and one day her children. Again, corruption as widespread as this is why communism is condemned by the Catholic Church. It denies the existence of a God while promoting selfishness. The risk for complete despotism or party takeover with no system of balances is too great and has proved to happen in the past, and the suppression and total disregard for human rights is far too prevalent in existing and pre-existing communist countries.